All right, Mountaineer Nation, thanks for tuning in to another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports, the second of my 3 preview videos for the 2026 football season. Earlier this week, I previewed the offense. Right now, I'm going to preview the defense. Later into the early portion of next week, I'm going to do a preview on the special teams. And then late next week, I finally have to do it because all the cool kids are doing it across YouTube and seeing it elsewhere on social media. I am going to predict the West Virginia 2026 season with scores, wins, and losses, as I've done for the last 3 seasons as part of this channel. So it's a lot of fun building up to the first game week, the first live preview show that I do on Thursday, September 3rd at 9 p.m. Eastern. So mark your calendars. Hope you tune into that one live and give me your feedback. And love to have your comments here as part of this channel as well. So I really appreciate the fan interaction. Try to respond to as many comments as I possibly can. So if by the end of this video you like me, like what I'm doing for this channel, please hit that thumbs up button. A like really helps out the algorithm so more Mountaineer fans can see this across YouTube. I'd love to have you a subscriber to my channel to follow the action with me, good, bad, or indifferent, for the next several weeks, September, October, and November, and who knows, maybe even into the college football playoff, and we're talking into January. So, all right, defense. Defense wasn't good for West Virginia last year, and that's kind of where I want to start with, kind of like, let's take a look back over last season, the offseason, to where West Virginia is today, as I did with the offense. So for the 2025 defense, from a statistical standpoint, West Virginia was tied for 112th in FBS in scoring defense at 31 points per game, 104th in total defense at 409 yards per game. As we know, just like the offense, the defense, it was quite the roller coaster in 2025. Games 1 through 3, West Virginia held Robert Morris, an FCS opponent, to just 3 points. The next week against a G6 opponent on the road in Ohio, West Virginia played a stout defensive game, forcing 3 turnovers, as is the weekly goal by defensive coordinator Zac Alley. Held the Bobcats to just 17 points, but the offense gave West Virginia nothing in the loss. West Virginia played arguably its best defensive game of the season the week afterwards at home in an overtime backyard brawl victory, 31-24. Then from games 4 through 7, similarly with how putrid the offense was, the defense was equally as unimpressive. West Virginia allowed 41 points on the road to Kansas. I know that included a special teams touchdown, so 34 points that the defense allowed, but then, in grand total, 41. 48 points at home to Utah. I was at that game in person in a rainstorm. One of the ugliest performances I've seen by West Virginia in my entire lifetime. That was disgusting. 38 points on the road at BYU on a Friday night game. Then the worst loss, in my opinion, of the 2025 season. This game should not have been the discrepancy that it was on the scoreboard. 45 points allowed on the road at UCF, coming off a bye even. Then in games 8 through 11, West Virginia kind of settled in. West Virginia allowed just 23 points on homecoming versus TCU, a Josh Hoover team that now Hoover's with Indiana. So West Virginia played better, much better than it did the week prior against UCF in that homecoming contest. West Virginia had an excellent performance defensively, despite giving up 35 points on the road the following week at Houston. Of course, West Virginia going down into the Cougars building, a ranked opponent, winning for the first time since 2018 and against a ranked opponent on the road. And then a sack fest the next week against a porous Colorado offensive line, saved the game the following week at home in a 29-22 loss. A tough loss effort with just one really bad quarter, the second quarter against Arizona State at Arizona State, a game I attended in person. And then game 12, West Virginia really gave up against Texas Tech. Shutout, 49-0. I see 2 sides to the story from 2025. I think on one hand, West Virginia's defense was a victim of circumstance last season with being left out on the field too much. And I got some numbers kind of to back up my claim. So West Virginia was 3rd worst in all of FBS last season in third down percentage, as I talked about in my offensive video. Brought Ollie Straw onto the field for just over 5 punts per game on average. In turn, with West Virginia going out 3 and out so frequently, having to punt, it just proved that West Virginia's defense was out on the field. West Virginia was fourth worst in FBS. So again, over 130 teams, fourth worst in time of possession at 26 minutes per game. So giving West Virginia's opponents on average an 8-minute advantage in time of possession. So just did. By the numbers, West Virginia's defense was out there way too much. And in half of West Virginia's games last season, the Mountaineers never led at any point in the game. I had to look this one up for my own confirmation. Kansas, Utah, BYU, UCF, TCU, Texas Tech, West Virginia never led. And I think a lot of offensive struggles in that game, playing down, just everything everything builds and just everything slides downhill. Is that if your offense can't play complementary football, you're not moving the ball offensively, you're leaving the defense out on the field for too long, so I think they get demoralized. And just, again, it was just a kind of a combination of suck for the at least half of the season in those games that were very one-sided losses. So where I can't give the defense credit is, I guess, so saying not a victim here, is West Virginia's pass defense was bad. Once I ran the numbers and looked into this, West Virginia was killed in the second half of the season last year, 127th in FBS, allowing 265 passing yards per game, and it came against a lot of teams' number one wide receivers. I remember this in real time and talked about it in my recap videos, but BYU's Chase Roberts, 4 catches, 161 yards. TCU's Eric McAllister, 9 catches, 124 yards and a touchdown. Amare Thomas from Houston, 10 catches, 99 yards, 3 touchdowns. Colorado's Amarion Miller, 6 catches, 131 yards and a touchdown. In the game I went to at Arizona State, Arizona State was without Jordan Tyson for that contest, as well as Sam Levitt at quarterback. It was Derek Eusebio who came up with 6 catches, 74 yards, and had a touchdown in the second quarter, that big quarter for the Sun Devils. And then against Texas Tech, it was 2 guys, really. Wide receiver Caleb Douglas, 5 catches, 127 yards, 2 touchdowns, and then tight end Terrence Carter, 10 catches for 98 yards. So just in that second half alone, I mean, West Virginia was just getting eaten alive. I think it was when Michael Coach just really got exposed in that Friday night game by Chase Roberts on some of those plays that Coach Rodriguez refers to as West Virginia getting mossed, and then they attacked him. Opposing offenses were kind of shying away from him and trying to attack Jason Chambers, and then it kind of flipped. They went after Michael Coates in that second half. Happy to see Michael Coates is actually doing pretty well. I think for the Cleveland Browns, had an interception in a preseason game earlier this weekend, so awesome to see that. So for West Virginia's pass rush, it was good at times, but just inconsistent last year, and you've heard that from Zac Alley over the offseason. A quarter of West Virginia's 28 sacks on the season came in the Colorado game. 4 of the sacks came against Robert Morris. So, and the advanced stats back this up. Pro Football Focus's pass rush grade ranked West Virginia 100th in the country. So, at time, like I said, it was good, some of those more memorable defensive performances, and then there were just times, like I said, through games 4 through 7 that West Virginia just didn't really do well. Just inconsistent pass rush, demoralized defense because the offense wasn't keeping up in games and making it either one possession or just a little more competitive. And then there were just some really good pass catchers in the Big 12 last year. Roberts, McAllister, Thomas, Miller, Eusebio, Douglas, a lot of good receivers. So in the offseason, here's my take on the offseason. I talked about this during high school signing day, transfer portal period, even into the spring. My opinion is West Virginia added some defensive players with intrigue, and I'm going to talk about them. But I think whereas the defense was invested in 2025 with guys like Jamori Robinson, Michael Coates, Eddie Kelly, 24 others out of the transfer portal, I think West Virginia's staff took a different approach defensively this season, taking more of an even distribution on guys with multiple years worth of eligibility as there are one-year guys, in addition to guys who were returners. who are kind of second string guys that I'll break down in just a second here. I still think there's some guys with some intrigue, as I said. I think there's some emphasis on guys who will compete and develop this year as part of this 2026 group, probably jumping up the depth chart toward the end of the season, or if there are any long sustaining injuries, which very much happens around college football. Look at some schools already like South Carolina that are being decimated by some injuries. I think these players will gain some great experience for when they're all back next season competing for a Big 12 championship. So that's what I kind of have a theme for this year, is I think you can lay some groundwork that's going to pay dividends for next season that's done this season. I wish West Virginia would have taken this approach a year ago, but I understand it. Without this complete staff hired, when Coach Rodriguez was hired, hitting the transfer portal late, having to go for some more one-year guys. They aren't saying it directly, but that was technically a year zero. So that's where I'm hoping, and there's going to be no excuse, that this is technically year one for this staff with everything they've invested long-term into the roster. So as it pertains to the 2026 defense, I don't think we'll see any schematic change initially with a 3-3-5 that consists of 3 heavy down linemen, a rush end outside linebacker nicknamed the Bandit, who acts like an upright fourth lineman off the weak side. West Virginia will also have a third safety, a nickel, who plays up like a third linebacker. Now, as if you followed my channel for the last 3 years, and something I've said on social media for a long time, I don't like the 3-3-5 because it leaves you, I feel like, a little light across the front and doesn't create enough of a pass rush unless you're bringing exotic blitzes with guys from different levels all on one play. I think my classic example of the 3-3-5 working out perfectly is the 2008 Fiesta Bowl. I think that game was incredibly well coached by Coach Castile, and all of the different playmakers that West Virginia had as part of that 2007 defense. We saw it in 2010, looked really good, 2014, 2016. But for the most part, West Virginia, for the better part of about a decade now, has kind of been thought stuck in the wilderness and hasn't necessarily adapted to a heavier, more base rush attacks in the Big 12. I think kind of like the air raid, not necessarily went out of style because everybody's got to pass in today's day and age, but there's a heavy emphasis on the run game in this conference. And it just has seemed like for the better part of the last 15 years at times, and more so in the last decade, that West Virginia has just seemed a little bit light on that defensive line. And I talked about that through the Neil Brown era. They tried to do that with different rotations across the defensive line in the front seven. I thought going into, I think it was 2024, that we were going to see more of a transition over to a true 3-4. Which Brown alluded to, talked about that kind of in tandem with Leslie. I think there were mixed messages during that period of time, but we've never seen that. I don't think we're going to see any sort of schematic change. That's kind of what we're going to see out of this West Virginia team. I really thought that I had the perception that West Virginia was going to push the envelope defensively last year, but taking into consideration sacks, quarterback hits, and quarterback hurries, West Virginia only hovered around the 65th to 70th percentile nationally, according to Fall Sports. So I think this tracks on what I was saying about the kind of the roller coaster part of the season. West Virginia looking good early on through 3 games, terrible middle, and then kind of followed up strong in the back quarter besides the Texas Tech game. So my premise with this defense all offseason to today is I think the goal and hope of the West Virginia defense in 2026 is that the offense sustains better drives than they did in 2025 to own more time of possession, score more points, lessening the pressure off the defense more so than it did a year ago. Because I don't think last year's defense was necessarily bad. It just was not helped at all throughout the offense, and the year went sideways at points and times. And then, as we talked about already in the back half, pass defense kind of let West Virginia down. I still think there's a lot of I think, and I bet the coaching staff is banking on ... to this defense. So I'll kind of explain here. Let's, finally get into it, kind of level by level breakdown. So seeing, I think it was Tuesday, an updated depth chart was posted by Chris Anderson off 247 Sports. So, I track this on a Google spreadsheet, basically 24/7, 365. I already have started on advancing next year's players into my spreadsheet with the commits that we have. And then I update that through the high school recruiting, transfer portal recruiting, so on and so forth. So this tracks basically with what I've had for the offseason. A couple of changes that have happened through fall camp already. So never a dull moment. At defensive end, looks like it's going to be Zeke Durham-Campbell, the fifth-year defensive end, the transfer out of Coastal Carolina. I like him, even though he was one of the later transfer portal additions. You kind of thought West Virginia might stick with what they had, but bam, he came kind of late onto the scene, passing on Auburn, Michigan State, Virginia, Mississippi State, Kentucky, Baylor, UCF, Syracuse, and SMU instead. Third team All-Sun Belt last year, 42 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 pass breakups. I like him on the outside of his size, like 6'5", 250. Don't think he'll necessarily, or he will kind of go on the strong side, with kind of the weak side being for where the bandit outside linebacker comes off the edge. But I think he'll hold his own there on the end. And then in the middle, I was expecting this because these were two guys who were part of that second rotation last year on the defensive line, and they played really well. I can definitely think back to that Arizona State game. They had a lot of confidence, felt like they were building in that one. Nate Gabriel Jr. and then Corey McIntyre Jr., redshirt junior, both at the nose tackle and defensive tackle respectively. Both guys, Gabriel, just 286 snaps last year, just 13 tackles, a tackle for loss on a pass breakup. For Corey McIntyre, just 174 snaps last year, 13 tackles, half a sack, and a tackle and a half for loss. So my huge question mark as it pertains to the defensive line, who is the outside behind Durham-Campbell going to be? Because I think you could kind of get away with the JUCO guys, or I really hope that Taylor Brown kind of comes on as a redshirt freshman, is kind of that second rotation on the defensive line. Can these guys, like Durham-Campbell held up all last year for Coastal, but, coming up from the Sun Belt now to the Big 12, a step up in competition. And then Gabriel, McIntyre, can they play starter snaps? And then who will behind them will take over and have that kind of production like Gabriel and McIntyre gave for this team a year ago. So then kind of talking about the front four, with a guy, a bandit who's going to play up. I think initially we're going to see Harper Holloman, the transfer from Western Kentucky, put up some pretty decent numbers down there. Another, what are they, the American Conference? Or are they Sun Belt? I don't know off the top of my head. They're 2025, 39 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, an interception, 6 QB hurries, 4 pass breakups, and a blocked kick. The guy who I think that by season's end should become the starter, want, is Toby Hastrup. Just reminds, it's really hard for me to honestly peg somebody because Hastrup is heavier than Bruce Irvin. Bruce Irvin only played somewhere in the ballpark of around 225. Hastrup's much heavier than that. But man, does he have the get-off explosiveness, just scat back type of cheetah agility off the line of scrimmage that I have very rarely seen out of West Virginia defensive ends since Bruce Irvin's days. I mean, Dante Stills was an awesome, probably best defensive end West Virginia's had since that period of time, but he doesn't have the kind of Hastrup just seems like the sky is the limit for him. Just really, really fast. Only been playing football now for 3 years. Pure athlete. I can't wait to see what he does. I'm really excited for him. So when I consider Durham-Campbell on one side, Gabriel, McIntyre, off the edge, Holloman, is that a front that gives me a lot of confidence? I'm going to kind of say meh. I liked what I saw in the spring festival, but I know that was kind of an intra-squad scrimmage. How's that team going to go up against the Big 12 competition that West Virginia has, as well as Virginia? Are either of the two interior defensive linemen Chris Neal or Darius Stills? No. Is he Campbell, Johnny Dingle, or Julian Miller, or Dante Stills? No. Is Harper Holloman, Bruce Irvin, or David Long? No. Do I think they will be as adequate as last year's group? Yes. I think with Hastrup being kind of the wild card that could set West Virginia on the kind of trajectory to being an emerging star, again, that's going to shine more so in 2027 than 2026. At least that's kind of how I feel on paper as a fan. And then I like I said, I hope some of the guys who are redshirt freshmen that Coach Rodriguez held over from the Neil Brown regime, who were Neil Brown recruits, Taylor Brown, Brendan Caesar, Wilnerson Telemock, I hope they, produce. I hope they show that, hey, they are worthy of a roster position. They're building blocks of this program. Keep the machine moving. You got to have guys who can contribute on the second rotations, especially if injuries happen, wear and tear in the fourth quarter, second half of seasons, etc. So moving on to the linebackers, there's been some movement, it seems like, from spring through to today, especially at the will linebacker position. So weak side will linebacker position. So according to Anderson, the biggest mover is Cam Torbor, now projected to be the starting will linebacker. I'm surprised. The guy who only played 3 games last year, 1 tackle, that's all his stats accrued. A guy who's continued to, put on weight, get yoked, saw his picture in the team photo, and I'm like, okay, yeah. I mean, I knew that on signing, late signing day ad in 2025 when the staffs transitioned from Brown over to Rodriguez out of Hoover High School. And if you ever watched, not Friday Night Lights, or it was just the Hoover High MTV TV show growing up for me. I'm like, oh yeah, Hoover High, heck yeah. Love seeing a kid like that come in. So to be a starter as a redshirt freshman, there's got to be something that he's doing in camp that he's taken off. So I'm really intrigued by that. And then Ben Cutter at the middle linebacker position. I looked into Cutter's stats last year. I just kind of thought to myself, Chase Wilson, Reed Carrico, they were kind of the middle linebacker starting names throughout the 2025 season. Carrico, Wilson had some injuries at time, but then tended to play through them. So Ben Cutter and then, of course, Ashton Woods got hurt midway and was shut down. Ben Cutter finished 6th on the team in tackles in 2025 with 38, 3.5 for loss, a sack, had 2 interceptions, a fumble recovery, 2 pass breakups, and a quarterback hurry. What more can he do? Is he ready to be a starter? I love the way that he's endeared himself of the offseason, pretty much shying off for, rebuking the question of did you ever seek the transfer portal? No, I love Morgantown. No, I love WVU. I want to be here. Love the fans, everything. That kind of loyalty plays to a fan like me and others in wanting to cheer Ben Cutter on. Just there, sometimes I watch on film and Ben Cutter just over pursues, over pursues the running back on a tackle. He overshoots his gap sometimes, back cuts back or something, and it gets by him. So I'm looking for Ben Cutter, to put it all together finally here. He's going to have an extra year's worth of eligibility because he didn't redshirt. So he is a true 4th-year senior. So who knows? Like I said, this could be a case of, build on some confidence, become a starter this season to take over, in 2027 to lay that groundwork. When I look at both or all 3, even if you drop Holloman back into more of a 3-3-5 linebacker, is Holloman, Ben Cutter, Cam Torbor, Scott Jerko, Adam Lenort, Grant Wiley? No. Or, some of the other, Mark Megro, Reed Williams, combination of those guys in the mid-2000s. It's where it's hard for me to kind of say. Like I said, I think, again, coaches are banking on this. I can think this optimistically. But just right now, look across that front 6, and those are guys who, had some playing time a little bit here and there last year, looking to step into the shoes of starting roles, or they're from G6 competition in Holloman and Durham-Campbell. Where I know I feel a little bit feel like I'm kind of sensing a little bit of pessimism if you're listening to me about defense. Now let me give you a little bit of optimism. I think West Virginia has a really solid trio at the safety ones position in Gamir Latimer, Kamari Wilson, Andrew Peldrell. Latimer, of course, from Wisconsin, Wilson from Memphis, Peldrell from UNLV. I mean, the coaching staff, I feel like, has been underrating. I think they want to keep quiet on how good Wilson is. And then Peldrell, raved about over the offseason. Latimer, of course, representing West Virginia at Big 12 Media Day. He was one of West Virginia's first transfer pools out of the portal, joining his brother Amari, and really excited to be here. So Latimer stats don't pop off the page. He was a guy who played kind of outside cornerback, but previously was at the nickel safety position at Jacksonville State in 2024 when when Coach Rodriguez's staff was there. And then did have a year with Zac Alley in 2023. So 12 games played, just 28 tackles and a forced fumble. But the coaching staff feels sold that he's going to be their day one starter, kind of a Fred Perry, heir apparent. And they feel really high on Latimer and what he can do. Peldrell, again, stats don't really pop off the page. 8 games played, 29 tackles, half a tackle for loss, 3 pass breakups. But just the way that the staff talks about him just sounds like he's all gas, no brakes, hit stick in a bottle, like maybe a little bit undersized, but he's going to be one. And I love that about safety. It's like, truly, if you just come up and you're physical and you can hit, I don't care kind of what the size you are, just be physical out there. And then Kamari Wilson is probably the guy that I'm most excited about completely on this defense. Numbers do speak for themselves. A guy who started out at Florida and then eventually ended up at Memphis, now here at West Virginia as a redshirt senior. 84 tackles, 6.5 for loss, a sack, 2 interceptions, 4 pass breakups, a quarterback hurry, 2 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. So Wilson is going to be the general back there in the safety position. I think going to kind of play more so as like a high free safety, based upon what I've read from Anderson. And then why I'm also so excited about these safeties is I really like West Virginia's twos. I love the combination of Matt Sig and Jacob Bradford at the spring game. Just seemed like those guys were developing some rapport. Guys were kind of flying all over the ball, making positions. So I think Bradford had a couple of pass breakups in there. Sig coming across the field and making some tackles. I think Malik Hawkins is going to want to prove himself. If Mike is going to be the starting quarterback, Malik is going to want to say, hey, I'm here too. Like it was double trouble. You got two for the price of one, it seems like. And Hawkins brothers, one on the offensive side, one on the defensive side, wanting to play up. Having a brother myself, always trying to be competitive on the field. And then Cam Reddick is a guy they got out of the transfer portal from the JUCO level that might see some time here and there at the 2s and 3s in the rotation. So I like what West Virginia has at the safeties. I think, across the defensive line, I like what Gabriel and McIntyre, the rapport that they showed at the end of the last season. This is their time to shine, even though I think Gabriel's a young junior. McIntyre missed an entire season a few seasons ago with an ACL tear injury. This is like their put up or shut up times in their careers. I think in the safety positions, that's where I feel confident that West Virginia will be better. Not to downplay anything from the guys in the safeties last year, but I just like what they did at that level, and maybe they can help out and fill the gaps and hole in the run game to kind of help out Cutter and Torbor, especially if, early on they're still trying to figure some things out. And just kind of going back there to the linebackers, West Virginia did bring in Tyler Stoltzky, Malachi Hood from Florida Atlantic and Illinois respectively. Maybe they rotate in. If Ashton Woods' shoulder's 100%, I was higher on thinking that Ashton Woods would be West Virginia's starter than Ben Cutter. But if Cutter has come in and outplayed Ashton Woods, I think that's what we'll see. We'll kind of see division of labor to be, 75-25, like looking at the snap counts, and love what Keenan Cummings from Rivals does every single week, posting out the snap counts after the fact. I really appreciate him doing that, and I encourage every fan to go out there and kind of look at those after the week that's just passed, so it kind of tells the tale of who's getting the priority in snap counts, who's getting those second string opportunities, and how equally, or what's the kind of percentage of snaps of starter versus backup. So then at the corners, this is another position of concern for me. West Virginia going with a cornerback one being Nick Taylor. Taylor was, with Jason Chambers, prophesied kind of as like the pro and then the understudy. And then Taylor got onto the field, seemed like sooner rather than later last season, but was playing over at safety, so a little bit out of position. No, he had the interception in the game I attended at Utah. He did have 20 tackles, played in 11 games, took a body blow. I can't remember what game it was. Was it Texas Tech or... There was gun game on, I think it was an onside kick. He just absolutely got obliterated on that one. Hope that he, bounces back, moving back to his maybe more natural position of cornerback, that he's going to guy that has like a really bounce back breakout season at cornerback one. 6'1", 190, maybe doesn't have that kind of size that some of these guys that West Virginia brought out of the transfer portal. But I think he needs his shot, needs his opportunity. I'm glad he's getting it. And then Chom's, I heard this again, different, but I was saying Jean. I think it's Jine. So Chom's Jine. I'm going to practice that one. The coaching staff's talking a lot about him. I don't remember him so much so from like standing out from the spring game, but seeing some photos of him, how long he's definitely long, very much so. He plays all of his body, his physical stature at like 6'3", 205, long, lanky guy. He just only played 346 snaps last year at Georgia State. Had a pick, 25 tackles, 3 pass breakups. Just are these two guys that are cornerback 1 and 2? Or, where else would they start across the Power 4? Or at least in Jine's case. Then I look, two guys who must be kind of overachieving over some of the newer guys that West Virginia's brought in. Looking at cornerbacks too, in Keyshawn Robinson, I know an in-state kid that was a holdover from the Brown regime. Kamarius Bomar was a late add last cycle. He's a redshirt freshman. So I'm really wondering and watching this case, this court case, and checking in like daily now on the West Virginia roster, hitting refresh online to see if Jason Chambers is officially added, because I don't think Chambers was all that bad last year. Like, I think of how good Malachi Ruffin was for West Virginia in 2024. I think Chambers followed suit. And again, adjusting to the Power 4 level, coming up from Appalachian State. I think if you got him in, now, what has his spring and summer looked like? Has he been doing his own workouts? Of course, he didn't participate in winter workouts, spring conditioning. It's August. It's August 19th. I guess he's participating in team activities, so got a little bit of fall camp experience. Is he going to be a plug-and-play week 1 guy? Are you going to go with Taylor and Jine for Coastal Carolina and then UT Martin, then put Chambers back in there for Virginia? I don't know, just what's the acclimation period for him? But if you could have Taylor on one side, you could have Chambers on the other side, okay, at least I know what I'm getting. Or if truly length is the thing of need at the cornerback position, then so be it. Like, I would love if this staff kind of went like the old Mike Gundy Oklahoma State defenses, or am I allowed to actually credit Pitt as a West Virginia fan? I love press man coverage. If you have the long, talented corners who can do that and not get beat over the top, I like that. Because if you add the extra dimension of a pass rush to that, hard to execute as an offense. If you're going against a defense that can really press at the line of scrimmage, not allow wide receivers to create separation, don't get burned over the top, and you have the pass rush that can add to it. I like that as a formula for a defense, and I wish West Virginia would do that a little bit more. But no, maybe we see that, maybe we don't. If maybe they just didn't have the personnel last year with Coates and Chambers, keeping Chambers maybe around as an insurance policy and working in some of these other guys onto the team. But Bomar smaller, Robinson smaller. You would have thought it might be some of the guys that West Virginia brought in for the JUCO ranks. I did see them in the spring scrimmage. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but just if I'm kind of like taking a pecking order of how confident I feel about this defense, it's safeties, D-line, linebackers, corners. Maybe you flip the linebackers and the corners. I don't know. So in summary, I feel as about uncertain about this West Virginia defense as I was about the 2024 and 2022 defenses, and those didn't end up being great defenses. The 26 defense, I just think, will be very dependent upon the offense playing better complementary football, and then the games West Virginia finds itself in trouble in or loses will be the games in which West Virginia can't sustain drives and the dam breaks against better opponents. I don't think this will manifest in the first two games, not until Game 3 against Virginia, similarly to like what happened with West Virginia last year against the Backyard Brawl, but then again played great against Pitt after playing decently still in a loss to Ohio, and then boom, fell apart from there. So I don't think we'll know a lot more until Virginia. Then after that Virginia game, West Virginia host Oklahoma State in a home contest. I think that provides just as much intrigue, is just the same kind of fork in the road for the season that I think the Virginia game is. Drew Mestamaker, Wyatt Young, Caleb Hawkins against this defense at home. What will they present like offensively against this West Virginia defense with a lot of firepower, but a completely remade offensive line, completely remade defense. So that'll be a fun one with some fireworks. Then Noah Fafita in Arizona at home, Connor Wegman at Houston at home. I know it didn't mean anything against Utah or against Texas Tech last year, that the West Virginia defense feeding off the home crowd could be an intangible difference maker in a game or two this season. At least that's kind of how I feel about it. This year will provide very much, it's kind of a side note here. I think this year will provide some evidence to my claim that West Virginia when it plays against more traditional and geographic rivals from the ACC and Big Ten respectively, that they play better than they do against teams fans don't care about as much from the Big 12. So that's where the onus is going to be on Mountaineer Nation. Be present in person, be loud. If this defense at home against some of these teams, West Virginia is welcoming 7 teams to Milan Puskar Stadium. That's like unheard of. West Virginia never gets a season that works out this way. So can West Virginia's fans be the difference in these contests to kind of help out the defense, which I think is going to be at times bend but don't break, or will West Virginia give up the big play? So shutting down the big play is going to be a key for this season. They think they can do that now because of the length that they have. But beyond that, a hot start, I think, such as going 5-0 out of the gate before the meat grinder hits in the season's second half, could give the starters confidence they need to sustain before I think some of West Virginia's young players with a lot of upside start to further develop and either contribute more snaps or take over starting roles. I'm thinking Telemock or Caesar at defensive end, Hastrup at bandit, Jacob Bradford and Matt Sig at safety, and then Vincent Smith at cornerback, a 4-star player that West Virginia's got late here into the summer, didn't enroll early, didn't go through spring practice, but at 6'2", 215, he's the biggest. I know he's 1 fewer inch and 10 pounds listed shorter than Gene, but Gene's a 5th-year player. Vincent Smith's an incoming true freshman. So I think cornerbacks coach Rod West called him hell on wheels coming, soon to Morgantown. So really excited what he's going to add. So when I get to the numbers, trying to break it down, considering last year, considering things, I do think West Virginia will be better. So it's like, oh, Carson, seems like you've gone through this whole freaking video and you've done nothing but kind of like disparage the defense. No, I think the offense is going to be better. That's going to help out some of these things that dogged the West Virginia defense a year ago. So for its comparable talent or comparable production at the end of the day, in tandem with playing more home games, friendlier confines, fan base that's behind this program, I think that's going to translate to better statistics at the end of the day. So I'm going to say, and I do have on paper my predictions with the score, so the math adds up here with what I said of West Virginia scoring around 31 points per game on average, allowing, I'm going to say, 26 points per game. So that puts West Virginia somewhere in the ballpark around 70th in the country. So to go from, in one season, a team that was tied for 112th to then 70th, I think that's progress. I don't think that's West Virginia jumping up into elite status, conference championship contending, anything like that. But that's what I want to see in 2026. And that's what I think all fans want to see, is you have to see in year 2 under Coach Rodriguez progression. We're going to see progression offensively with the huge investment that they've made. Defense, I think, while they didn't get the kind of roster influx of talent that the offense got this past offseason, I think things will kind of more even out as the offense plays more complementary football, better offensive football, puts up more points. So 26 points per game allowed. And then I'm going to say for a total defense, as I scroll here, I'm going to say to 380 yards per game. I think West Virginia will be in the ballpark of where it was last year from a run rush defense perspective. So right around 140 yards per game allowed. And I think they're going to get 25 yards better in the pass defense. So not much better, but better. So 240 yards per game comparative to 265 yards per game for a total of around 380 yards per game. And that kind of tracks with about same in the ballpark of points per game allowed nationally, going to be somewhere around in the 70s. So that's kind of it. As time of possession equals out, sustaining drives, not leaving players out on the field, they'll then be better. Pass rush theoretically being more consistent. And then with the length that it has on the outside at the corners, West Virginia is able to get Jason Chambers in, back in, and he plays even better than he did in 2025 in combination with these safeties and with the depth that they have at the twos, across the board on defense to keep the starters fresh as well. And I think we have a better defensive year. Marginal, but just a better year than 2025. So how you feeling about all that? I know I gave you a lot of food for thought, a lot to chew on, Mountaineer Nation. Leave your comments here on YouTube. Love to have you as a subscriber to my channel. Hit a like on this video and tune in next week. I'll break down special teams, and then predictions. And of course, tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog. I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. So hail West Virginia. Let's go.